Hello and welcome to Super Science Saturdays. Today's theme is Eat Your Science. So we've talked about food science in the past on Super Science Saturdays. So this is not the science of food. This is things you can learn about science using food to demonstrate, to show you more about different kinds of science. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Scoggin, the Early Childhood Librarian at Newburgh Free Library. So let's get started with Eat Your Science. The first topic I want to talk about is coding sandwiches and binary sandwiches. So, what is binary? Binary is a language that computers use. Computers have millions, sometimes billions of switches inside, and a switch can be either on or off. That's all it can be, on or off. It can't be in the middle. So anytime a switch, one of those tiny billions of switches in a computer chip, is on, we write down a 1 in computer language. And if the switch is off, we write down a 0. So let's say I want to show a binary with a sandwich. Now, I'll put a link in the description more about binary because there's a lot to learn about binary. But anything that's either one thing or another, yes or no, on or off, one thing or another can be a binary. So we're going to do a binary sandwich. So I have my bread here. Let's say I want to make a binary ham and cheese sandwich. And just for fun, let's do the letter S in binary because I'm Mrs. Scoggin. So if you put a certain code of ones and zeros, the computer will know that that's an S. So we're going to call the cheese a 0, and we're going to call ham a 1. So my binary sandwich, to spell the letter S, would be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. So you could make a real sandwich in binary. We'll have our other piece of bread on the outside. You can make a real sandwich in binary to spell something out with slices of ham and cheese or anything where you have two different ingredients. And I put a link in the description to the codes for all the letters. So if you want to spell out the first letter of your name as a sandwich, you'll be able to look out what to put in there. For the letters, there's 8 different ones and zeros. So it's going to be a pretty big sandwich. So we can use a sandwich to talk about coding. Coding is how you write a computer program. Well, what is a computer program? A computer program is a set of instructions. It's how you tell the computer what to do. But how do you tell a computer what to do? You have to break down something that you want to do into steps and give it step-by-step instructions. So we're going to use a sandwich as an example of how you would write a program. So let's say we say start the program. Put 1 slice of bread on a plate is one step in a program. So if you're the coder, you would write a line of code to tell someone to make a sandwich. Put a slice of bread on a plate. The next step is find a topping that has not been used. So here you can see we have lots of toppings. We have some tomatoes, some pickles, some onions, avocados. We have a lot of different toppings. So you find a topping that's not on the bread and pick one and cover the bread with a layer of that topping. That's step 3. Put a layer of that topping on the bread. Next step, check if all the toppings have been used. Nope, we only used 1. And now the next step, step 5, is what we call a loop. Or if you want to use a really fancy word, we call it recursion. That means go back and do those steps over again. Go back to step 2. Find a topping that hasn't been used. Step 3, put that on the sandwich. Step 4, check if you've finished all the toppings. So you keep doing a loop. Step 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, until when you get to step 5, it says if you have used all the toppings, then if yes, put another slice of bread on top. And then the program is over. So That's exactly how you would write a code, except you would use a code language instead of writing in regular words like we're saying find a topping or something like that. In English, you would have to use a coding language so that you could tell the computer what to do. But I think coding a sandwich is more delicious. Now let's try eating our earth science. You could make a cake to show the layers of the earth. You may have heard of a layer cake, but this is a layers of the earth cake. In the middle, you see a little tiny red circle. That would be the core of the earth. The yellow part is what we call the outer core. The red part is what we call the mantle. And the brown part is what we call the crust. Now really, the mantle would be a lot bigger, and the crust would only be pretty thin, that brown part, because the crust is a very thin part on the outside of the earth. So the mantle, the red part, is, well, it's like lava, but we call it lava when it's coming out of the earth, out of a volcano. If it's still inside the earth, instead of calling it lava, we call it magma. So you could make a cake in a bowl-shaped pan with different layers to show what's inside the earth. You could also show the layers of the earth by using Rice Krispies, any kind of crispy cereal mixed with butter and marshmallows to make a sticky treat. You could use food coloring to make different layers. On the right there, you can see someone made the outside layer blue, so it looks like ocean, and they used some frosting to draw the continents on the outside. Now that crust that we were talking about before, that top layer on top of all that magma, it's not one piece. It's like a giant puzzle with really, really giant puzzle pieces all fit together. Sometimes the puzzle pieces are the size of a country or even a continent. They're huge. They don't move around a whole lot, but they do move either very slowly or sometimes a bit of them will move quickly, and that's what makes an earthquake. There are different ways that those plates can move. They could move apart. We call that divergent plates. They could squish together and one kind of goes under the other one, and that's called a convergent movement. And sometimes they slide. One slides one way and one slides the other. That's called a transforming movement of one of those plates, those giant puzzle pieces. The puzzle pieces are called tectonic crackers. I mean tectonic plates. But we can use crackers to pretend that they're the tectonic plates. So we have here some graham crackers on top of some whipped topping, some kind of whipped cream, so that you could hold the crackers and slide around the whipped cream the way that the tectonic plates would slide. Apart, divergent, together, convergent, or sliding backwards and forwards to be a transforming plate. We could still talk about the crust, but now we're talking about on the very, very surface of the crust where we have dirt. The rocky part of the crust is the deepest part. That's what we call the bedrock. And then on top of that, there are some big chunks of rocks and other things that are called parent material. Then we have a layer that's called subsoil. Then we have a layer that's called topsoil. That's where there's lots of worms and roots and good bacteria and old leaves that rotted and fell apart from last year. All those kinds of things are in the topsoil, and that's what's right under the grass. The grass in this picture, you see it's labeled organic material. So grass, plants, all those things that grow right on the top. That part that's called topsoil, that's the part that makes plants happy. So if you're trying to grow a garden, you want to have some good topsoil. But here in this glass, instead of having real dirt, we have the bedrock is the glass. Parent material are some, looks like peanut butter chips or caramel chips and some chocolate chips. The subsoil is pudding. The topsoil is some crumbled chocolate cookie. And the organic material grass is some colored coconut. If you wanted to make a healthier one, you could use some colored yogurt and maybe some crumbled granola, different things like that to make your layers of the dirt to go with your layers of the earth. Now, if I mentioned gardens before, if you're trying to grow plants, you might want to make something called compost. What is compost? Compost is where you're mixing together different things that will fall apart. We say biodegrade, and they're going to turn into that good topsoil that's a treat for plants to grow, and the roots of the plants like to go into topsoil. So here we're pretending this is a compost pile. So at the bottom they have some crumbled cookies, then they have some green colored marshmallows, or you could use white if you can't find green, some chocolate chips, some shredded coconut again, and some little candy on top. And you see how it says brown, green, brown, green, brown. If you were making a real compost pile, you would want to have layers of different kinds of things that plants like, not all one kind of thing. So you would have things where it says green would be things like leftover vegetable peels from making dinner, or old flowers, or coffee grounds, or grass. The layers that say brown are things like coffee filters, or tea bags, or even hair if you had a haircut, or shredded paper, eggshells, all of those kind of things would be the brown part. So if you made layers of different kinds of things that plants like, it would all turn into really wonderful topsoil so you could grow a garden of vegetables or flowers. How about now we eat our astronomy? And now for some Oreo astronomy. So I have some Oreo sandwich cookies here. You could use any sandwich cookies, but something that's chocolate and vanilla works better to see the contrast of dark and light. So we're going to talk about the moon. We're going to use these cookies to show the phases of the moon. So what are the phases of the moon? Well, the moon, as you know, is round like a ball, so a sphere. And the moon doesn't give any light because it's just a rock, so it doesn't shine. But the sun shines, and the moon is going around the earth, so it's moving. So at different times during the month, the sun will shine on different parts of the moon. If the sun is shining this way, the whole moon will be lit up. We say it's a full moon. So you could use, there's our full moon. The whole thing is lit up, so it looks like a full circle. If it's only on the side where the sun is shining, then it's going to only look like part of the moon, or most of the moon is lit up, and there's going to be a little bit that's dark. There are times when there's only a tiny bit of the moon lit up, and that's when it looks like kind of like a curved shape. We call it a crescent moon. So that can be our crescent moon. You can see when you can see just a little curve of light, and the rest is dark. If you see a curved crescent moon, sometimes it'll be curved like this, and sometimes it'll be curved the other way. So it looks like the moon grows bigger and gets smaller when different parts of it are lit up. So the way you remember this, that I was taught how to remember it, if you see a moon that's curved the way that a D is curved, you think it's daring to get bigger. So D for daring. If it's curved like this, like the letter C, then you say it's becoming a smaller crescent. So we say the word moon waxes, it looks like it's getting bigger, or it wanes, it looks like it's getting smaller, until none of the moon is lit up by the sun, and we call it a new moon. It looks completely black. When the moon is mostly lit up, we say it's a gibbous moon. When it's only half lit up, we call it, well, not a half moon, even though that sounds like it would make sense. We should call it a quarter moon, even though it's not a quarter lit up, it's half lit up, because it's a quarter of the way through the whole cycle of going from being completely dark to completely bright. If you had a number of cookies, you could make a diagram of the whole cycle that would look something like this. But because the moon isn't really getting bigger and smaller, it's just different sides are lit up. Sometimes you have a picture of a moon, and there'll be a star right in the middle of the curve of the moon. But that can't be. We can't see through the moon. The part of the moon we can't see is still there. It's just dark. You can do some more sweet astronomy. by using candies and pretzels. Candy constellations. What is a constellation? A constellation is a group of stars in one area of the sky, and people have imagined lines drawn between them to make a picture, like a dot-to-dot picture, but the lines are just imaginary. So these are some pictures that people in a country called Greece imagined many, many years ago, thousands of years ago. So for example, that one in the middle that says Scorpio, they're imagining dotted lines connecting those stars to make a scorpion. That's curly little tail there and its two pincers in the front. You could imagine your own constellations, but these are the ones that astronomers, people who study stars, use to draw their imaginary lines. So over on one side there, you can see someone has taken the lid of a jar and poked some holes in the shape of those different constellations. And then you could put little candies in the holes to make candy constellations. Also, if you shine a light through those holes in the lid and you have a dark room, you could shine on the wall and then it would look like the stars in those constellations without the imaginary lines. So let's talk about candy constellations. This is the constellation Cassiopeia. Kind of looks like a W. And I've just glued some round yellow candies to be the stars, and I used some pretzel sticks to be the lines that we're imagining between the stars. Now I've glued all these candies to one flat piece of paper, so they're all lined up. None of them are closer to you, none of them are farther away. They're all just on one flat sheet of paper. But if you look up at the stars, really they're not all in the same line with each other, even though it might look like it. So here I have a couple of almonds. So right now I'm holding them equally close to you. And so you might say, well, those two stars might be in a constellation. Let's see the Big Dipper constellation. But really, if you look up in the night sky, sometimes one is closer and one is farther away. But because the stars are all so far away, they still look like they're in one line with each other. That's what we call parallax. Now let's eat our life science, also known as biology. Here we have a demonstration of what we call edible quote-unquote bacteria. Bacteria are tiny, tiny life forms, and scientists who study them often use these little, looks like plastic little trays that are round. We call those petri dishes. Now usually they fill them up with something feels kind of like Jello, and that's called agar. And bacteria, these tiny life forms, will grow on that special gelatin. But instead, we're going to use real Jello, and instead of having bacteria, which some bacteria is good, but a lot of bacteria will make you sick. So instead of growing real bacteria, we're just going to pretend, because there's many different kinds and shapes. So we have some bacteria that is being pictured with almonds or sprinkles or little candies or teeny bits of marshmallow. So you could study about different kinds of bacteria and what they look like, and then make pretend bacteria for a science dessert. Now let's talk about our cell diagram pizza. Some of you may have watched my Super Science Saturdays over the summer with Dr. Learn-A-Lot. And he also mentioned cell diagram pizza. So here we have a pizza, and we're putting different toppings on it. Instead of just being yummy, those different toppings show different kinds of things that are in the cell. So the cells are the smallest living parts of our body, and there are many, 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 many cells in our bodies. Our whole body is made of cells. So I have a link down in the description that can explain what all of those different things are. For example, that ring in the middle, that's an onion. That's the nucleus of the cell. That's the part of the cell that has a code in it that tells the cell how to make more cells. You could also do a cell diagram with a tortilla using different kinds of food. You could go a step further and actually make a model of that nucleus that I was talking about. Inside is something called DNA. And this is a quote from Science Sparks. What is DNA? What does that stand for? DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Wow, that's a big word. It's what we call a molecule, a long, thin molecule. Molecules are made of atoms, which are even smaller, but DNA is a long molecule, a bit like a recipe that has the instructions or the code that tells cells how to behave and how to grow. It's just like before, we were talking about codes that tell computers what to do. The DNA is the code that tells your cells what to do. What is DNA? DNA is made out of something called nucleotides. There are bits of DNA that make the whole thing, and there are 4 different nucleotides. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. We call those just usually A and T and G and C for short. So you could make a model with some candy, flexible candy straws, and toothpicks and little gumdrops to be the different nucleotides. You can see they're different colors. So the A nucleotide always goes with the T nucleotide. So in this example here, we have the yellow and the green always go together because those are C and G, and the purple and the orange don't just go together because those are the A and the T. And then once you've made your twisty DNA molecule, then you can eat it. Now let's eat our engineering. Here's a really fun one. Get some gumdrops, maybe different sizes, and some toothpicks, and maybe some wooden sticks would help. And then try to design a bridge. You could make a whole story about how people need to cross the bridge, cross a river, cross a big hole in the Arctic ice. But see what kind of bridge you can build. How strong is it? You could make your bridge, and then you could put weights on the bridge and see how much weight your bridge can hold. And you can try different kinds of bridge. You want to make a tall bridge, a long bridge? What's the best way? Do you need more gumdrops? Maybe more toothpicks? It will be an experiment to see the best way to make a certain type of bridge that you're trying to make. You could also use marshmallows or maybe some kind of gummy candy. You could see what works the best. Maybe you could even mix them. But if you're doing your experiment, we say change one variable at a time. So try changing one thing at a time. Maybe do all the gumdrops first and try different kinds of bridges with the gumdrops and then add something new to your bridge. Talking about engineering and holding up weight, did you know that eggs are really, really strong? Even though if you drop an egg or bang it on the counter, it will crack very easily. But if you press on an egg, then the weight gets spread out and it doesn't crack. If you take a raw egg in one hand and you just squeeze it with one hand, don't bump it against anything, just squeeze it. I think it would be really, really hard for anyone to break that egg. That's because eggs spread out weight just the way an arch in a building would do. That arrow on the top is like weight pushing down. You can see that the weight gets spread on the 2 sides. It pushes the weight down around the outside. Instead of just pushing it straight down and squashing that egg, it moves the weight over to the side. So that helps make the egg really strong. So if you're very careful, you can walk across raw eggs. Be sure to get a grown-up's permission and help before you try that, though. And there's so much more to eat or study. For example, bread. I could do a whole super science just about bread. There's a great experiment called making bread in a bag from the website Little Bins for Little Hands, and I'll put a link to that down in the description. So that's all the super science I have for you today. So happy learning and happy eating. Thanks so much for watching.